It's going to be a little tough. So our first order of business, approval of the minutes. Are there any revisions or corrections to the minutes? If not, we'll accept them as presented. Thank you. Open forum. At this time, we'd like to give our audience an opportunity to ask any questions about this agenda or about the operations within the school district. Personnel matters will not be addressed in public session. Comments may be recorded and responded to by the Board of Education or the Superintendent of Schools. We ask that you introduce yourself to the board, state whether you're a district resident, and keep your comments to 5 minutes or less.
Hi, my name is Megan Williams, and I'm here on behalf of the TCSD Foundation tonight. Just wanted to invite you all to our community art auction on Friday from 7 till 9 at the conservatory. All proceeds go to help Foundation sponsor projects which go directly to benefit the district. So I hope we'll see you there.
Great, thank you.
And where will it be?
At the conservatory.
And although we've publicly acknowledged your generous donations in the past, since you're here, let us reiterate our thanks for the Foundation's generous donations to the district.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, a new agenda item. We'd like to take this opportunity to have members from the TTA or the Trumansburg support staff share any information or ask questions they have about the district or the operations. Hearing none, we'll move on. Agenda changes? None. Presentations. Superintendent Bell?
Yes. So, good evening. I'd like to introduce Dave Parsons. He's here this evening with his administrative staff from TST BOCES to present the program and administrative budget.
Thank you. Dr. Madison has some other things that he's dealing with tonight, so you're stuck with us. So I'd like to start with the introductions. Dave Pitcher is our Director of Facilities, Barry Durkel, Assistant Superintendent, and David Barr is our Exceptional Ed, Alternative Ed, and External Programs. Diane Hessler is our Career Tech and Adult Ed, and she's got some other things going on tonight. So we'll go through our administrative and other budgets tonight so you can see what's going on. This is a slide that we do every year for each of our districts. Kind of gives you a little snapshot of what Trumansburg is according to BOCES. So the very top one is called ARWADA, Resident Weighted Average Daily Attendance is what that stands for. A number that comes from Albany. It's about 2 years old. It's the number of students in your district, but don't be excited. That's about a 2-year-old number. And then the percentage is how big is, what does that make up of TST BOCES? So we add all the districts together, and Trumansburg, that 1085 represents about 8.5% of the total TST BOCES. Aid ratio for Trumansburg's just shy of 64%. So any of the services that Trumansburg buys that's aidable, and they're almost all aidable. Transportation would be one that would be transportation aidable. The garbage service is not aidable. So those are just a couple of examples that are not aidable. Pretty much everything is aid driven. Number of students we currently have in the central CTE program is 43. We do a 3-year rolling average in our CTE enrollment. It helps level out those billings rather than having spikes if you have 43 and then you have 50 and all over the place, rather than to spike up and down. For many, many years we've done a 3-year rolling average. So the current 3-year rolling average is 47.5. Projected for next year is 48. So because that's maybe a couple years ago, you may have been at 57 or whatever. So those numbers are calculation. Number of students in our exceptional ed program is 17.2. We bill on a day in to day out. We don't cut kids in pieces and bill you for them. We do actually bill for the actual time that they're in our programs. And the alternative program is the same way, day in to day out. Current contract is 4.4, almost 4.5 million. And that represents about 9.78% of our total budget. So you're very close to your size, and it's not uncommon to buy up or down from your actual size. It's whatever makes it work for your district. By all means, if you've got any questions, please stop me, or I'll just ramble right through it. Our program budgets, and these are especially different than any other types of budgets. These are driven by request. So districts that are asking to do things, we have to create a budget that is big enough to provide that service. So when we're looking at these kinds of changes in our budgets, we may have more students, we may be doing more services, we may be doing less. So it's really driven on request, not doing the same thing we've done in the past, and this is what the increase is. I try to make sure people understand that, because it does look like, wow, what are you doing? So the budgets themselves, you can see the changes there. Some of them are up significantly, but it's because we're asked by the districts to do more things. Some of the other ones are down. There again, cross contracts especially, you'll see those down if districts are saying, well, we're not going to buy computers. That's a big driver in that one. So they're not committing to buy something next year through any of the other BOCES. That would be reflected there.
What are the two increases in career tech and in instructional services? Are there?
Instructional services, actually, that's driven a lot by the PD and those types of things. Districts are asking for more of that. That'll drive more need, drive more budget, drive more expense that comes with it. The career tech, we actually are trying to upgrade a lot of the things we have. Some of the, like for instance, our welders are almost 30 years old. So we have to upgrade those so when the students are going through the program, they're going out in the field with things that they're probably going to use when they get there. So we are trying to do some things to increase the equipment that they're actually using. So that is driving a fair amount of that. So if you look at our total change, and keep in mind all the numbers that I've shown you was based on the initial service request, which went out in December. So we put this together and we present the same one to all the districts. Our final requests actually are back, so we're in the process of changing all our budgets based on any updated requests that came in the final request that came back in the beginning of this month. So at that time, we were looking at a 5.33% increase in our budgets. There again, a lot of it's driven off of requests for about $2.4 million. And you can see that the three big drivers going up, instructional, career and tech, and exceptional, and the one big change going down is the cross contracts. We also facilitate almost $1.9 million in grants. So we're always either looking for grants, or a district says, hey, can you do this grant for us? We'll go get it. And we're constantly renewing the grants that we already have for different things. So that's just a kind of a number to keep in mind, that we actually do go out and facilitate. The biggest driver in all of our budgets is the salary and fringe. At this point, all of our contracts are settled, so it's kind of nice to have those in place. We know what they're going to do for the next couple of years. Salaries themselves drive about 2.9%, 2.93% increases, and that represents a little over 1% of our total budget is just salaries. Health insurance for next year is 7%. The rates that we've looked at is for a cooperative. National trends are running somewhere in the 9 to 10. That represents just a little less than 1% of our total change in the budget. So if you put those two together, there's 2% of the increase in any of our budgets is driven strictly from salary and health insurance. Retirement for next year, we're looking at an increase about 5.25%. ERS and TRS rates they're predicting for next year going up, even though we've gotten some pretty good news as far as their returns. All of their money's in the stock market, so if they have good returns, our rates that we pay go down. The rates that we've been told were before they had some pretty good returns, so we're hoping, they pretty much set what the rate is going to be for the next year, but we're looking at the next year after that we're hoping that that one will go back down again. But they pretty much tell us what we're going to pay, and there it is. That represents about 0.22% of our budget. And the other things like dental insurance and so on and so forth represents about 0.09 of our total increase in the budget. Our capital budget's made up of two pieces. One of them is our energy performance contract lease payments, about $286,000 a year. That one, I think we're done with that one in about 8.5 years, eight or 9 years. That covered a little over $3 million worth of work that we were able to do through the EPC. The other $27,000 of that is actually rent. We have to put it in this budget because it has to be an A budget, and Article 1950, which is what BOCES is under, says any rent that you're going to pay has to be in that budget. But that $27,000 is for the adult ed program. So the adult ed actually cuts a check back to this budget when we pay the rent for the adult ed program. It's one of the churches downtown that the adult ed rents for their services. So out of that 317, the districts are actually paying about 286,000 of that for the EPC program, or EPC thing. Reserve accounts, BOCES can't actually have any unappropriated fund balances. At the end of every year, whatever's left over has to be refunded in the same manner it was purchased. So if you buy something based on Arwada or FTE or percent use or whatever it is, however the money was sent to us, whatever's left over is sent back in the same fashion as a refund back to the districts at the end of the year. So we start every year with a zero budget. Reserve accounts that we do have, we don't have a capital reserve. We do have an unemployment reserve. We're self-funded for unemployment. So if somebody is laid off or whatever and gets unemployment, the state pays the unemployment claim to the person. They send us a bill, we send the money to the state. So because we're self-funded, we do have a reserve set aside for that type of thing. The insurance and flex, we're also self-funded for our dental program. So we have to keep money in our dental program to cover those as they come in. So we're self-insured, if you will, for dental, and I think you guys are also, the way that's set up. Our CTE reserve, at this particular point, we don't have any money in it. These figures are all off of our audited figures back in June 30. But we are going to start putting money in that this year. We felt it was prudent to start putting money aside for that. And the way that program works, or that reserve works, is the equipment that you have in the CTE program, you depreciate over 10 years. So you take 10% of the value of what that piece of equipment is, and you can put that in your reserve to set it aside. So when it comes time to buy a new piece of equipment, and it may not be that one, but it gives you money to buy stuff with, you've got the cash to buy it with, versus having to have a spike in the tuition and then back down again. So we're trying to do things like that in order to level any of those spikes that may come along. But we will start putting money actually in that this year. Our ERS retirement reserve, we can do 1.5% or 1.5 times our annual ERS bill, and our ERS bill is roughly $1 million a year. So our plan is to make sure we get somewhere around that $1.5 million in there. So if the ERS and TRS rates start taking off, we'll start pulling out of that reserve to there again try to level that charge out to the districts.
You're not currently pulling out of that?
Not at this point, because the rates actually have been going down. So we've been trying to put it away while it's going down, and if it goes the other way, then we'll start pulling it back out. We're trying to get the peaks out and the valleys out. It makes the business officials and the superintendent's job a whole lot easier if they can have some kind of predictability. The administrative budget is the one that you folks get a chance to vote on, so we spend a little bit of time with this. You will vote on this just like your general public votes on your budget here at the district. Once this is voted on and passed, then we can't spend a nickel more than that. So we want to make sure that if anybody's got any questions with this one, they're answered before you get there. The biggest driver in this one, and it has been for as long as I've been in this position, and long before me, is the retiree benefits, the line 841. Anybody that retires out of TST BOCES, or any BOCES actually, if they're eligible for health insurance and dental insurance in retirement, those have to be paid out of the administrative budget. It's just the way the Article 1950 was written. So we have to make sure that we keep enough money in that and we fund all those promised benefits when they're in retirement. That in itself represents about 2.9% of this whole increase. The rest of it is what Jeff and I had a chance to look at. But we every year look at that retiree benefit line to make sure that there aren't any people in there that no longer need it. But we try to keep that one in line. That represents just a hair under, it's about 40+% of our budget. Some of the other BOCES are running in the 70–80% of their budget is that line only. So we feel pretty fortunate, if you want to call it that. We have started to see some of the fruits of labor of negotiations probably 10 to 15 years ago, where things were put in the contracts to change the way the retiree benefits were put in. So we are starting to see some change with that, but it's a long, drawn-out process. So the expenses themselves are about 3.67% increase. The revenue that I put in there is a revenue that I've used for years. A lot of that is unpredictable, but we most of the time get that same amount for about $78,000. So you know, you're looking at about a 3.75% increase in the budget itself after you take the revenue back out. But that's the one that if you got any questions, please ask questions on that one, because that's the one you'll get a chance to vote on in actually next month. Any questions on that one? Well, there's the vote. So next month, between the 16th and 30th, by law, there has to be a vote. Our vote for next year, for next month, is April 18th. At that point, you'll be actually voting on two things. The budget itself that you just saw, and then board members for the TST BOCES board. And this year, the Groton, Lansing, and Newfield positions are up for elections. Any questions? Very good.
Any questions?
All right. Well, we thank you for letting us take some time and present our budgets for you.
We apologize again for the delay.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Someone else.
Okay.
You're safe. Let's hope this one works again.
Next on our agenda is final draft budget presentation by our business manager. Administrator.
I'm gonna put my stuff over here because it's easier on me. And the clicker. Is that over here, Steve? Oh, it's hard to see.
Yeah, that's really.
Is the top one the, pointer? You see it? Did I turn it off? This one. Can't see it?
Oh, there it is.
Okay. Oh, see, it's working dark, is it?
Yeah, I'm saying I can't hear you, but it's dark.
Okay, well. Everybody here? Everybody's here. How are you? We've been working diligently to try and come up with a good budget moving forward, as we've talked in several meetings so far. It's a difficult year because of some of our increases in expenses. And so we'll do a review of where we are right now, and this will be pretty close to where we come in final, barring any other changes that come under discussion or recommendation. And that is hard to read. Yeah.
You're not going to read that.
No, I can't turn it. Basically, we have two propositions going forward. The first is to authorize to expend the sum set forth in the general fund appropriations in the amount of $26,664,946, and to levy the necessary tax. Again, necessary tax. So at this point in time, as we move forward, we're going to be staying at the limit of the tax cap. But this is the first resolution. The second resolution, which you can't read either, is for the purchase of 3 buses. And we're going to discuss the change in that proposition because we're going to be borrowing or using our reserves. It's not going to change the proposition, but we're going to use the money out of reserves as opposed to general fund budget. That's our proposal, so that we can narrow that gap that we had. You know, we're trying to find ways that we can smooth over this year. Because we still have money in the vehicle capital reserve, we're going to be able to use that to pay for the majority of the cost of the buses going forward. Instead of taking it directly out of the general fund budget.
The majority or all of it?
Almost all. There's another, the estimated cost is 330, so we only have 302 left in the reserve. So 300 out of the reserve, 30 out of the general fund. This again, sorry. Hard to see historically, we've gone from 2015-16, a budget of 26 million and change, and you did a significant amount of cuts to take it down to 24.8. In 17-18, which is hard to read or impossible to read, is 24,808,744, and the current proposal is for 26,664,946.
I'm just going to try something here.
Okay.
I think the bottom of the slides tends to be more important than the titles, so if we go lower.
That's fine. Too bad we can't bring the screen down any further.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that's not bad. We'll
Does
just
that
let's keep playing with that. We have to stand by.
I don't think we can get the screen any lower, sorry.
No, it's on it. Okay. So last year's tax levy, just a few details on the tax levy. We had growth factors of just a little over 1%, and we had at the end of last year $100,000 in carryover remaining. So this year, again, to balance that gap, we're, in addition to the 2.7% that we talked about earlier, we can draw that 100% or $100,000 in from what was carryover last year. That brings our tax levy increase up to 3.7%, but it's still within the tax cap. That's the allowable maximum of the tax cap at this point in time. So that would give us $402,000 in additional revenues. Question?
What has the tax levy been in?
Tax levy was $10,908,880.
I'm sorry, what was the rate increase in the?
I think last year it was what, 2.7? I don't
It's
recall.
about right. The rate increase as opposed to the tax levy
Right.
increase.
I understand there's a.
Yeah, I can get that. I don't have that right now, but I can certainly get that. Let me write that down for a question.
Thank you.
Yep. So the tax rate increase. Generally don't deal with tax rate increases too much until the final days because it can be deceiving to some degree, only because
Right.
of your assessment changes.
Right.
So, so the total levy increase is 3.7. So we can see we have the tax levy increase brings us $402,000. At this point in time, the state aid is projected to bring in $376,555. The state budget isn't final yet. We're hoping for some more money, Again, if that money comes in, we can use the use of additional fund balance, but we won't have those numbers until the end of March. We should have it by April 1st. They've been on time with the budget for several years now. They are looking at allocating somewhere to education, but we are not a high needs urban district, so they're going to be siphoning money to the highest needs district, I think, to a greater degree than they will to even the rural and suburban districts. But we'll see how that comes out. So as we're going to talk about in more detail, the transfer from debt service is up by $475, but again, this is the transfer from debt service to come into the general fund to go back out for the capital project. So that's like a flow-through item. It's not a true increase. It's just a flow-through item. The appropriated fund balance is up considerably right now. This is a number that we hope to get down, either by changes moving forward or additional state aid. And at this point, additional state aid is probably the least significant item that's going to come into play, unless we make other budget changes. Appropriated reserves. We did talk about appropriating more of the employee.
Can I just
Yep,
interrupt for
sure.
a second? So appropriated fund balance, meaning that 269, it's actually the 514,000, correct?
Yes, yeah.
And that's money that is being moved forward out of this year's budget?
Some of it is, and then I'll show you on the next slide. And right now I'm looking at 300 coming in from this year's budget, because we're very tight on the expenditure side. I have some room, extra revenues on the revenue side. So right now I'm looking at 300 coming back, but applying 514. So we're dipping into that 4%.
So you may recall in the past, I've always talked about the 4% as that untouchable. So in layman's terms, many people have a savings account that they just don't touch unless there's an emergency, a boiler in your home goes or something like that. So we have consistently had our unappropriated fund balance at 4%, and we're finding that the gap between our expenses and our revenue stream is so great this year that we do need to dip into that 4% to some degree to merge the two numbers, to match the revenue with the expenses.
In the appropriated reserve, the majority of the increase is due to increasing the employee retirement reserve. And we have close to $2 million. I'll look at the specifics in a second. So using all of that to pay off the current ERS. This is causing me agita, as I'm sure everybody else is suffering too. We're going to get through next year, and as I've spoken with Kimberly before, the year after and forward is going to be problematic. We really have to work this year to see going down where we can streamline or plan for the future, because it doesn't look like any of the other revenue streams in terms of state aid or tax levy or local revenues are going to give us any significant dollars for the subsequent year or the year after. We're pretty, when you're running consistently 4.5% to 5% increases in expenditures, but you're only generating 2 to 3% in revenues. We're using it. We're using the fund balance. We're using the reserve. God bless you. You have them, and we're able to do that without hurting the program. But it's not sustainable over the long term. And in terms of fund balance and reserves, we look at the balances. So for unemployment, we're using a little bit every year and using and drawing that down. The retirement contribution reserve is the one that was close to $2 million, $1.58 million. We're looking at applying $329,000 to next year. The capital reserve is at 4.5. Next year, we're going to be adding that. Actually, I probably should have put it this year. $4.5 million. We'll be adding the $500,000 to that. But in the paperwork, it says cash. So at this point in time, it's $4.5 million in capital, and we'll take the capital reserve, we'll make a resolution, move it over, and then we'll have the $5 million for the capital project. Okay. The reserve for transportation, If we, actually that's wrong, because if we use it for the buses, that's going to disappear. The $302,000, my error, I didn't put in the purchase of buses, so we're gonna drain the capital reserve for transportation. We have small repair for reserves, and that leaves us with assigned appropriated fund balance at your $514,000, and unassigned appropriated fund balance is $811,713, and that's only around 3%. Where we're allowed to keep 4, we're gonna, if we go forward with these numbers as a final, it would drop our fund balance to 3% unassigned.
And the unassigned then is what I know to be the general fund.
All of this is general fund.
Okay,
All of this is general fund.
but some of it is assigned.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Well,
The
under the
assigned-
current,
Go.
under the current plan, whoops, wrong. Under the current plan, whoops, that's 514,000 would be assigned. I'm looking at
Mhm.
at the bottom. What this will show or not. Okay. All right. I'm deficient when it comes to little red dots. I'm looking at 300,000 right now coming back into
Mhm.
the fund balance and applying 514, so it's going to drop it.
So essentially, the 300,000 comes from overstated lines in the current budget, or lines that we have underspent this fiscal. So in the past, you may recall that last year we had significantly more than that, and it depends on the fiscal. And this year, our expenses were very close to what we budgeted, and at the end of that, we only have 300,000 that won't be spent in anticipated expenses. So that 300,000 can then be moved forward into the next fiscal as part of the assigned appropriated fund balance.
Good?
Good.
Good.
Formulating my question.
Say what?
I'm formulating my question.
Okay. I'm not going to be as lucky as Dave. You're going to have questions. We talked previously about some of the increases in the benefits. State retirement, our base is up. Teachers' retirement, our base is up. State retirement rates are actually fairly flat, down a little bit. Teachers' retirement rates are up. So we have a combination of the rates and the base going up for teachers' retirement. Hospital, medical, and dental insurances, as Dave forecasted 7% in his budget, we use the same 7% in ours for the medical benefits moving forward. Workman's comp is up. Actually, that makes up for 2 years because we under budgeted, not intentionally. The rates ended up coming in higher than what we thought they were going to come in for when the budget was prepared last year. So that's part of the increase, and then there's a subsequent increase for this year. So budget to budget, it's going up 41,000. This is just a description of the state's 3-part budget. It's basically made up of your administrative piece, your capital piece, and your program piece. And we'll go through the lines that are relevant to each one. Overall, our administrative costs are at 9.5%, the capital costs are at 14.3%, and program costs are 76.2% of the budget, total budget overall. You're going to see a little bit of shift in these numbers, and I'll explain that. Some of it was due to reclassification, which we'll talk about with some salaries in a minute. Basically, your Board of Education, any expenses that you incur, the clerk, Chief School Administrator would be the superintendent, the business administration office, the auditors, tax collectors, and legal fees. Not a lot of change there, basically some salary increases. Under personnel, I think I moved a little bit of the advertising to the personnel line as opposed to the instruction line if we're advertising for positions. So some of that, it was a shift over. Public information services, we're discontinuing the BOCES Public Information Service COSER, and we're discontinuing a contract for public information contract that we have. Basically, what's left there is the advertising, the brochures, the postage to put any kind of public announcements out is the majority of the remaining cost. So printing and mailing is our printing expenses that run through. Then Dave talked about the administrative costs and the capital expenses for BOCES. We come down to, you're going to say, oh my God, supervision is up. It's really not. We didn't hit, you okay?
Yeah.
Oh, poor thing. We're listening to her. Just
Good.
basically, because you can't see the bottom of the screen, the Dean of Students were reclassified from the instructional side to the administrative side because technically they're not in the classroom, they're not teaching, so they should be in the administrative line. So shifting the Dean of Students and shifting a director position into that line, that's the biggest increase. We didn't add here, it's just a change in and the relative benefits. And my method of calculating benefits vary a little bit from Kimberly's and such, that I take a percentage of the payroll as a whole as opposed to individual benefits for each person. They're both acceptable methods. This is more generic and tends to smooth over time, especially when you start talking about health benefits.
Lauren, can you go through, and maybe we need to wait for Kimberly.
Sure.
But the thought process again of moving that into the administrative, the deans of students into the administrative component, I'm not sure I'm understanding that, because they are represented by the TTA, correct?
It's not a matter of who they're represented by or what certificates they hold, it's by their function. So clerical individuals in the principal's office are supervisory. Deans of students are not in the classroom, but they help with discipline and they do administrative type of work, but they're not teaching. If they were teaching and in the classroom, they would be considered instructional.
Aren't they teachers on special assignment?
They may be by definition, but their current function is administrative. And that's the difference. It has nothing to do with the union. It has nothing to do with whether they're covered under the administrator's contract or the teacher's contract. It's because they're not in the classroom. They should be in the administrative line. I had the discussion, Kimberly and I had the same discussion prior to.
I think one of the reasons that we have not ever made them or designated them as administrators or required certification as administrators is because the past superintendents, maybe decades ago, didn't want to see a big line item. If they're going to be there anyways, then there might be some advantage to having certified administrators in those positions and designating them as such, so that we actually have more control over what they can do and not do.
That's a different discussion.
Yeah.
I agree. If you want to change that, right now it's just a matter of the function that they perform. Okay. And certainly we can continue and get into that more. Okay. The capital component is basically our operation of plant, vehicles, bus purchases, the operations of plant and maintenance of plant. Let's look at my notes for a second, make sure I don't misspeak. We did cut back on some of the equipment and contract lines. And we did not fill one of the director's positions that was recently vacated. So that line item came out of that budget in addition to decreasing some of the equipment and some of the contract. Cutting back, and we really trimmed even more. It's a tight budget, so it's kind of scraping the barrel. The bus purchases again came out of here. We initially had budgeted 220, and the difference out of, if we were going to take out of the capital reserves, we're taking that down to 30, and the 300 will be coming out of the capital reserves. Debt service is down because our debt payments are down. We did refinance one of the bonds this year, so we're able to save some money, but our debt payments are leveling off, which again coincides with the new debt that will be coming on board under the capital project. And 435 is net difference between adding the $500,000 to transfer to the capital fund eventually, and then taking off, we reduced the amount of capital, cash capital project. So we took the cash capital from $100,000 down to $35,000. Okay. So administrative, capital, and then program. Program is everything else that's in the classroom. So legal fees, you'll see part of the legal fees here, they're split between administrative and instruction, because a lot of the work that we do has to deal with the students, not just with administrative pieces, so it's generally split between the two. In-service training and instruction is up. That's because of the decrease in BOCES services and increase in the curriculum position. Teaching regular school, because we moved the deans to the administrative, we have a subsequent fall in the instruction lines. So you see that decrease there. And the notes are down there when you can see the full slide. We spoke with program for students with disabilities in greater detail last meeting. Again, we have had a big increase this year, and we're looking at still another increase going into next year. So we're really making up 2 years worth of significant changes in our program deliveries. We have increase in BOCES services. We have a shift in monitors that came in. We have higher tuition costs. We have higher service costs. So that's a significant increase in the program.
Lauren, is there margin in there, or is that exactly what we
That's
anticipate to
pretty
expend?
tight to what we have to have. There's not much margin in there. I've got a little bit of margin tucked away in a couple other places, but not something that I would sleep well at night on. I'd like to see more, but I think in terms of, I think we're going to have to find a way to either, if things do escalate yet again, we're going to have to take a look at other things.
So essentially, I bring that up. So if we find out on April 1st that we should pick up $100,000 or $200,000 more in state aid, wouldn't we likely put it in that line for programs for students with disabilities?
We could do that.
To build in a margin in case
Yes.
we have additional move-ins?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we have, and as I said, we have a little bit of margin built into the budget overall, but not a comfortable one. And as you know, with a small district, 1 or 2 services can escalate and create quite a problem for our budget. So yes, I would look at doing that. Occupational education is up, you know, because of the program, the number of students, and the rolling average that Dave spoke about. And teaching special schools, we eliminated that budget for summer school. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
So this is, summer school is a program that we purchased through BOCES last summer. We ran it on our campus, and it was a shared service, meaning that other school districts also participated in summer school. So essentially the hiring and oversight was the responsibility of BOCES. This year we are the only component school district that was interested in that service, and as such the price was higher for us to participate. So at this point we are feeling that it's not sustainable, it's not something that we could continue. If we were choosing to offer summer school as an option this summer, looking forward, we know that next summer it would definitely not be an option. So we have chosen to not offer it this year either. Looking at the deficit that we were facing, instead we wanted to maintain program that we currently have.
And it's continuation school library. The decrease is, we're not losing any services there. We only, actually I did a partial FTE in the library split with instruction. So that was just straightening out a little bit. Computer assisted instruction isn't up very much. It's a relatively flat. guidance regular school is down just a hair because of the tightened up the budget line having to do with the testing. You know, and if we do have to, I wouldn't, based on the last couple of years what we spent, if we do need to increase that for any reason, I would just have to pull it out of one of those little lines that I have extra. Health services, we didn't cut anything out. What we did was we budgeted for a tentative extra position last year, which we didn't realize. So that position has gone out.
No, we did realize it was a special education need.
Okay.
That is no longer necessary.
Thank you. We just reduced I reduced the budget on diagnostic screening, again, relevant to the last couple of years and what was actually spent. Psych services are basically salary adjustments. Social work and pupil personnel services are fairly flat. Co-curricular interscholastic activities, co-curricular is down mainly because there was a portion of a clerical that was charged off here that I moved to a different line and kept the stipend for the co-curricular activities in the co-curricular line. District transportation services, if you look at district transportation and garage building, realigned the mechanics and took them out of the bus driver lines and put them into mechanic lines for the garage. So that's another reclassification. So you see just some things are just shifts. They're not real big adds or deducts. They're just shifting from one classification to another. So,
The decrease in athletics is caused.
Interscholastic, basically equipment and uniforms. Uniforms, I took 10,000 out because of because we replenished a lot of uniforms in the last few years. So I believe the budget should be lower this year moving forward.
But we're still on a cycle so that we are replacing these far more frequently than we were in previous.
Yeah, and I'm waiting for the details in terms of being able to schedule those out. But next year with the 2 or 3 sports that need to be covered, they don't need the amount that was originally budgeted last year. It was 15,000 for this year, and I don't think we need anywhere near that for.
We bumped that up significantly over the last year to make certain that all teams have new uniforms.
Right.
And so now that they do, it can be lowered so that it's a rolling replacement cycle.
Right. Transfer to other funds. The school lunch program, we always budget for transferring money to the school lunch program because it operates in the red. Well, there are other expenses that the general fund has been covering that have been kind of dealt with in other lines, such as the health insurance, where the health insurance would be moved over and paid out of the general fund health insurance. The comptrollers being more particular in terms of making sure that the lunch fund programs are showing exactly what it is that they're costing. So over the years, a lot of districts have always kind of put in what they could afford and they covered the rest over here. So what this just does is makes it more transparent. So we're way over budget on our employee benefits in the school lunch program, so that instead of just paying for it out of the general fund, we're actually showing it as a transfer to the school lunch fund. So it's more transparent. The same expenses, it's not going anywhere, it's just that it's more visible. And then the school lunch program, again, then is more transparent in terms of the true cost. Another piece that was being moved over is the out of facilities. One of the reasons the contracts are down in facilities is because they've picked up the school lunch contracts for repairs. Again, those are being shifted to the school lunch budget off of the operations budget, so the transfer to school lunch is going to be greater again. And
so is that $66,000 increase all to school lunch program?
Yes.
So that's a $66,000 increase in the loss of revenue from last year to what we're projecting to next year?
say this, I don't know that I understood your question.
So we've already been transferring money because the school lunch program is not self-sufficient.
In the red, yes.
Okay. And now that in the red is increasing by another $66,000?
Yes, but it's the same deficit you've really had over the years.
Okay.
It's not a new deficit.
All right,
It's just being shown differently.
all right, that's
I'll
what I
make
want to
that.
clarify. Okay, thanks.
So before, if we had an extra $60,000 in health benefits, it was just paid for through the general fund. Now we're gonna
Now
show
we're
it
gonna show
here,
it. Okay,
and the general fund will show the transfer in.
okay.
So many districts in the past have covered a good share of, if not all, of the health insurance benefits for school lunch employees, and it's just paid out of the health insurance line from the general fund. And what is new now is they're looking for the school lunch program to show in totality all of their expenses. So those benefits are now having to be shifted back to school lunch to show the true expense for the school lunch program.
So is it safe to say that the $66,000 is the amount that the school lunch program is in the red?
Yes, over and above what it was already in the red. You gotta remember,
Oh,
they were
okay,
already in the
because-
red, because we already had budgeted to cover $80,000. I think 90, out of the 99, 80 of it is school lunch. So out of that, if you're at 66, you're at 150,
Okay.
it's up there. But it's just, it's shifting it from this line to this line.
Yeah.
Trying to be better. It's not good news, is it? I like to be in this position one year when it's like good news. I don't think I'm gonna see it. When you talk about the overall increase in the budget, I broke down what caused the increases in this year's budget, and the majority of it's special education. And you break it down, teachers' retirement, employees' retirement, health insurance, wages, those you're certainly familiar with the overall impacts, but the biggest impact is certainly from the special education services.
So, Lauren, can you go back to
Go
that
back.
for 1 second?
Sure.
So, where you have wages exclusive of special education is up 18%?
18% of the increase in the budget. It's not up 18%, it's 18% of the increase.
Okay.
And I backed off special education because I took special education as a whole,
Okay.
including the teachers, monitors, tuition, services, BOCES, everything. So segregating that out, the difference is 18% of the increase.
So there's about a $1.8 million increase from last year to this year?
Yeah, what did we, $1 million, actually it's right here, $1,856,000.
And so you're saying 60% of that is,
So 60%
Okay,
of
gotcha,
that increase
gotcha,
is
gotcha.
special education. And again, the administrative isn't a jump because we added administrators. It's just a reclassification between instructional to administration. So at this point in time, tax cap limit, state aid, hopefully we'll see some more. Projected revenues is just a recap of what we've already talked about in terms of the changes, and I think it was just an extra slide, so I'll go past it.
can you take us back to the first slide?
Very first,
Or not, the first budget,
oh,
first budget one. Where you showed the budgets from the previous years, 2000.
oh, okay.
Expenditure
This one.
budget history, that one. Can you refresh or maybe Kimberly can, I have a vague recollection that from 15-16 to 16-17, that $1.2 million reduction was because, not because we reduced program but because a capital reserve or capital project came off of that or something?
I think debt service had
Debt
fallen
service.
off with some of it.
I can go back and get a good list for you.
Yeah, I know that we definitely had several years where just moving forward, our expenses were very flat in terms of, we were really only increasing the budget to cover contractual obligations and health insurance. But I believe if we look at 15-16, that was likely a year that we had significant fund balance, meaning that that budget was built and not every line had been built from zero up. And so every year I kept scaling it back because every year we continued to have additional fund balance, which we were moving into the reserves, which was responsible, and then, offsetting future capital projects or purchasing buses. But now we're at a point where expenses beyond our control have pushed it back up. So let's say everything from 17, 18 had remained the same and we were only making increases for contractual obligations. I think we would have a similar budget. It would probably be 25 something. But again, you're looking at special education increases that we don't have control over. So, if a child moves into the district and they have a specialized program, it's our obligation to continue to provide that same program. And so those are a lot of the increases that we are seeing. So in a perfect world, we would have had additional fund balance again this year. So in many ways, it's good that we had fund balance built in because we were able to absorb a good share of those increases and still stay within the past budget. Where previous years, in 16-17, we had set the budget at 24.8 million, but we all know we ended the year far under that number.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, then the fund balance that was sort of built in
Yes,
this year
was spent.
was spent. So can you give us sort of a dollar amount, or ball figure of a dollar amount that we've...
Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe special education was about $700,000 of that.
I'll tell you. That we budgeted, 2.86 million, and we're spending right now over 3.5. So we had margin built in. So if we actually planned a $2.6 million special education, we overspent.
So we...
The excess plus.
So we overspent this year by about 700,000,
Yeah.
and we're going to increase it next year by $1 million?
Not another million, because the
A
700
total
is
of
built in.
1.2.
Because we're going from budget to budget. So we've gone from 2.8 to 3.5 this year, to just under 4 million again. But it's from budget to budget, so it's this year's increases plus the increase to next year, it's 2 years.
So over a 2-year
Plan-
span,
And it was
1.2.
legitimate, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
you can only plan so much. You don't know, you look at your past, you look at the consistency. You legitimately built in a few $100,000 extra just in case, and it turned out that 200,000 or 300,000 wasn't enough. You needed 7. So you've got to overcome that 7 plus again going forward
Which
into
you
next
may
year.
recall every year, I would say, in health insurance, we have additional monies for 9 family policies. So that's a place that Lauren would go to, and she'd pull that back to cover those additional expenses in special education, which in previous years, if families didn't speak for those policies, then that would contribute to fund balance. So That's why this year there may be about 300,000 in fund balance when we get done.
It's gonna be mostly on the revenue side.
Any other questions for Lauren? Thank you very much.
Thank you. How do I turn this off now?
I can do it for you.
Actually, I just want to remind everybody, as long as we're flow through here to the budget hearing date on May 1st, and then to the final budget vote date on the 15th. Okay, just a reminder for those before we close. Thank you.
Correspondence. We had a very nice email letter to the board from Hope Lewis, which actually we discussed at last board's meeting, thanking us for supporting the music program and also for reporting out on the number of students that we had in an all-state band and jazz band. And I believe we had 5 students. So we thank her for that letter. Committee reports, BOCES or Central New York School Boards Association.
Oh, I do. I'm losing my voice. Let me see. We, at BOCES, received a presentation from the Lansing School District, which has hopped onto the Ithaca High School's LINK program. And it is a program by which incoming freshmen to the high school, which down there is a huge change from the smaller middle and elementary schools. They take about, I think it's 20% of the student body that are juniors and seniors, and assign them to 3 or 4 new students coming in. They call them before school opens, chit-chat with them for a bit, gather with them for the first day, and they're the only ones on campus that day, which is helpful. And they do all sorts of games and, such. Some of them actually wind up tutoring at times, taking a kid sort of under their wing. It's, I guess they feel for sure that it's really made a huge impact on the Lansing student body, which is probably the only other, they have a pretty good size high school. And I think they're doing very, very well with it. The kids all seem quite jazzed about it. It gives some of the kids, some of the older kids, a chance to do a little tutoring, some mentoring. And I think all in all, it has really relieved some of the angst that typically sort of surrounds that freshman year. Let's see. May 4th is the BOCES annual dinner, I believe. And I do urge... April, I'm sorry. Why did May 4th is something else, that's right. Okay, and it is something I highly recommend that everyone who possibly can attend. It's a great opportunity to meet other board members in the area. We usually have a pretty full table, and it is a wonderful opportunity for our students in culinary arts to show off what they really do well. And it is pretty amazing what these kids put out, particularly the desserts. They're not to be missed. It is truly a pretty amazing meal. And again, as I said, an opportunity to really get to know board members from other districts and converse with them a bit. Let me see. There will be a NYSBA, recognition reception in Binghamton on June 26th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Robeson Museum Science Center. This is just sort of to celebrate boards in general and allow us to get together. I'm thinking of heading down, so if anyone would like a ride, it's a long way away, but I'd be happy to drive. It's just another way of trying to get board members conversing with one another and comparing what goes on at various schools. And supporting one another. Okay, our legislative forum was Thursday, February 8th at TSD BOCES. It was fairly well attended, but Barbara Lifton was the only board member there, so there was, you know, she was able to discuss a lot with us and was very helpful in providing information. Let's see, CNYSBA. Charlie Borgognoni has spent considerable time brainstorming with the CEO of MACNY, and for those of you, I will repeat once more, that is the, oh come on, I can't block on it now. Is it the Machinists? MACNY. It's a group of businessmen that get together and they rely on, well, it's where CNY is now in Syracuse. Central New York moved their office. I think I mentioned that the last meeting. And they support the communication between Syracuse students, or at least they did primarily first, Syracuse students and Syracuse industries. And now they've branched out and are including us as well. All of this Central New York region. And the CEO is currently sort of pondering how the two groups, MACNY and the School Boards Association and the schools, address the needs of what students are interested in, manufacturing. Manufacturers Association of Central New York, that's it. Yeah. Phew. They are discussing existing apprenticeship programs, continuing them, growing them, passing knowledge from one generation to another, the next generation, and designing programs that allow kids to continue with their apprenticeships while getting their associate's degrees. MACNY is also leading a pre-apprenticeship program, and if approved, it will connect businesses and students in the area as well. MACNY is also working to support the P-TECH programs throughout this area of the state. And currently, Syracuse has 4 P-TECH programs up and running, with a 5th on the way, which, considering the number of high schools they have, is pretty good. So they're coming along very nicely. And I think that is it.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions for Douglas? Okay, administrative report?
So we have a couple tonight. We can start with Josh, who's just going to give us an update summary of the middle school walkout.
Yes. So as you recall, there was an anticipated student walkout for March 14th, and we ended up with a snow day. The following day, March 15th, which was a Thursday, we had 21 of our middle schoolers participate in a walkout. I've got to commend our students for how they approached the situation. They were very proactive in talking to myself, talking to the Dean of Students, and being very respectful and responsible about how they were going to impact the school environment. They wanted their voices to be heard, but they wanted to do it the right way. So after Mrs. Bell sent a letter home, I also followed up a letter clarifying to parents that students would, because of the disruption to the classroom and the code of conduct, that the students would receive discipline for walking out of class without permission, but not because of what their beliefs were. And so, staying consistent with the code of conduct, a student who walks out of the class for the first time without the teacher's permission would earn a lunch detention. And so, we look at lunch detentions in 2 forms. You have the full time, or you have a half lunch detention, which is just lunch and then you still go out to recess. And we felt that it was fair that if the students were choosing to disrupt class and leave for the 17 minutes, they would have the 17-minute half lunch detention. And that and one of the students had proposed, could we write a letter to our local representative in lieu of that lunch detention to make sure that we're getting our voices heard in the right way. We said that sounds like a fantastic idea. We had, of our 21 students who walked out, we had 13 of them choose to walk outside, and they were respectful but still chanting about about saying no to school violence. And we had 8 choose to go down to the cafeteria because it was snowing, and they sat quietly and respectfully during that time. all the students, so of those 21 students, 8 came to school the next day having written letters to the representatives, and the other students served their half of lunch detention. I've also, since that Tuesday preceding the demonstration, had 9 parents reach out to me, all very positive emails thanking us for how we chose to approach this, as well as citing that they were impressed with how their students also approached it, and they were very thoughtful. So I think in terms of our students taking a stance on something they feel is important, approaching it the right way, and then also being willing to accept the consequences for those actions, I think I couldn't be any more proud than what we are. I mean, they really conducted themselves how we wish they would conduct themselves in the school environment. So,
Well done.
my understanding is there might be another demonstration. This is the high school scheduled for Friday. I think we would have had high participation, but some of them are more organized than others, and they wanted to make sure that what the high schoolers were doing is what they're doing. So I anticipate that we'll have another round of disruption this Friday. But again, if they conduct themselves the way they did last week, then it's very workable.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And the next administrative report is Jeannie Wagon. She wants to update us about an opportunity for our elementary students.
Yes, we're very excited to share decision making. Megan is also on the committee, as is Jody, and we wanted to share some information about a savings program that our students can do through Alternatives Federal Credit Union. We can have 1 day a week tellers, student tellers, collecting deposits from students, and the students fill out the deposit slips. This is for families who choose to sign up. The intention behind the program is to support savings for students from free and reduced households, but it's for all students. And the idea is not how much you deposit, but that you get in the habit of depositing money. Currently, it's in all the elementary schools in Ithaca. And so we were very interested in getting it started here. We started by going to Tompkins Trust because that's our local bank, and they did not have the program, and they recommended that we go with Alternatives. Megan, is there anything else you want to?
No, we just talked about the benefits for many different reasons, and the fact that it may allow some parents, because as well as the 4th grade tellers, they'll need to be parent or teacher supervision during these deposit times, and that it might be a good opportunity for working parents to be able to volunteer, because typically it's done before school starts. So that might be another positive to the program.
What the interest rate?
Oh, and there were several different there's several programs, and one of them is a college savings fund, and for families that are on free and reduced lunch, they receive a 10% interest on the college savings program.
Wow.
Alternatives is a 501c3, so they get a lot of grant money, which is why they're able to put the manpower into these kind of programs. And it was also refreshing to hear that they participate a lot. They'll pick up the deposits from us. They give the flyers that need to go home. They bring everything to us. So while there is work on our part to manage the program, it sounds like it's very well supported by Alternatives. They're not just sort of putting the onus of labor on the school.
And they, at this point, have had the program long enough that they have students who are in high school or who have gone to college. They even talked about one person who has saved to buy their first home, and they can remember starting their savings through this. So it's a pretty incredible program. So we brought it to the admin team today because the thought is we'll start in the elementary school, but it would be great if students could have an opportunity to continue to save throughout their years at T-Berg. So we'll see how it goes in the elementary, and then we'll see if we can move it up. Ithaca has never managed to move it past the elementary because they have so many sites, but I think we're really fortunate here that we could probably pretty easily make that happen. So,
Awesome.
an exciting idea for our students.
Would you say so?
Very exciting.
Yeah.
And John, you're not on the administrator's report, but do you want to talk about the play?
I'll give a brief student report.
Yes.
There we go.
Very brief. Spring sports are now a couple of weeks into practice. If the snow would melt, they could get outside and practice, but they're doing what they need to do inside to get ready for the season. This past weekend, we closed our show, our musical, Shrek, which Douglas can share was amazing.
It was truly phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Really professional. It was, I was absolutely, totally blown away.
As
I was crying
always,
when I left.
you just are awed sometimes by the amount of talent in this
Yeah.
little school.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an amazing show, and it was a lot of hours. And as I'm looking forward to getting reacquainted with my couch this week since it's now over. But it's been a lot of time spent here at the building. All worth it.
And then I'll just add to that our robotics team participated in the Finger Lakes Regional competition. They had the 7-seated robot. They were then asked to join the number 3 alliance, those placing 3rd, and overall they placed 2nd, competing against over 100 other schools. So they're really doing very well.
They just continue.
Yeah, and I would encourage anyone that has never seen them in action to take that opportunity, because it's just incredible what our students are doing in the moment, problem solving. Truly, through robotics, they're running a small business, so very impressive.
They are
Great.
They have ongoing fundraising going on right now because they have now qualified, as we mentioned last time, they have qualified for the World Championships, so they will be looking to raise money for that next adventure.
Where are they held, John? Do you know?
Detroit.
Detroit?
Detroit. Yeah.
Great. Moving to the consent agenda, any members like an item pulled? Those may I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Second.
Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. New business. Congratulations to the administrative team and to the board for the successful capital project proposition. We had yes votes of 294, no votes 90, and that brings us to formally adopting the resolution before you to appropriate money for that capital project. So I have a motion to undertake the capital project improvements consisting of additions to and construction and reconstruction of existing school buildings and facilities, site improvements, and the acquisition of certain original furnishings, equipment, and apparatus, and other incidental improvements required in connection therewith for such construction and school use, all at an estimated maximum aggregate cost of $24,997,442. And to appropriate and expend from the existing capital reserve fund $4,500,000 for such costs, and that the balance of such costs, or so much thereof as may be necessary, shall be raised by the levy of a tax to be collected in annual installments, with such a tax to be partially offset by Smart Schools Bond Act funds and other state aid available therefor, and in anticipation of such tax, that obligation the school district may, as be necessary, not to exceed $20,497,442 be issued.
Well,
Second? Questions? Hearing none. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. May I have a motion for the acceptance of notice of the annual school district meeting, budget vote, and election? Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby accepts the notice of annual school district meeting, budget vote, and election as presented, and that's in your packet. Okay.
So moved. Second.
Questions? Discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Acceptance of donation. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby accepts a donation of $4,028 from the Trumansburg Music Boosters to the high school music department as presented.
Second.
Okay.
That's really wonderful.
Yes. Yes, thank you, boosters. And all those people that contribute their time to help the boosters raise this money, and all those people who contribute to the boosters so that this money can be raised to the benefit of our students. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Open forum. At this time, we would again like to give our audience an opportunity to ask any questions about the agenda or about operations within the district. Personnel matters will not be addressed in public session. Comments may be recorded and responded to by the Board of Education or the Superintendent of Schools within 24 to 48 hours. We ask that you please introduce yourself to the board, state whether you're a district resident, and that you keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Hearing none, we'll move on. Board forum. So, District 5 legislator Ann Corman has requested that the Board of Education participate in conversation about the purposefulness of an armed guard at school districts. So, would we like to do that, or would we like to wait until we have the entirety of our group?
Rather have a little time to think about it and
I think it'd be more productive if we
have
had
everybody here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take over the discussion.
Okay.
Otherwise, we just wind up going over and over.
Okay. So we'll move that or table that discussion for now and move it to our next board meeting. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns to be shared? All right. Then I would ask for a motion to adjourn to executive session for matters relating to the promotion, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or persons, and for matters relating to collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We're adjourned to executive session. We will not return to conduct business at the adjournment of our executive session. So thank you very much.